can assure you, I would not want to wake up as president of China with 1.4 billion people expecting their lives to be improved. That is very challenging.
人民对美好生活的向往，就是我们的奋斗目标。
The Chinese government have brought about 600 million people out of poverty since the beginning of the reforms from 78.
我们剩下的最后的贫困人口是4000多万。翻过头来，它可能是最难以克服的深度绝对贫困。习近平以人民为中心的发展战略是极其独特的。
也是你们家里自己。
Engaging people's emotions and moving just beyond the idea of the party that delivers GDP growth.
The China Dream is a unique piece of political vocabulary he's used.
中国梦有2个层面，一个就是作为国家，一个作为个人。
党和政府都会帮助大家。
My name is Danny Forster. I'm a designer and a filmmaker, and I've had incredible opportunities to travel all over China. And for me, this is a fascinating moment to look at Xi Jinping.
I'm Dr. Jordan Ewan. As an engineer, technologist, and entrepreneur, I'm interested to find out how China is using innovation to solve some of these challenges.
My name is Mariana Potter. I'm an anthropologist. There's a phrase that's often associated with President Xi's policies. That's that they are people-centred. I want to know what that really means. In this episode, we discover the impact of Xi Jinping's distinctive focus on enabling people. Not just as a collective, but as individuals, with unique challenges and dreams in a fast-changing China. How can you have big dreams if you're worried about tomorrow?
Can everybody participate in the Chinese dream?
Take the story of Xi Jinping. Her husband's dead and her children have moved to the city. Her village, Shibadong, was once lost in the hills of Hunan province. For years, there wasn't even a road in.
改革开放以后，造成了很大的收入差异，农村啊、小城镇啊，被人们遗忘了。
They're familiar with income inequality throughout their history. They know that it's a big challenge. They're working on it.
那原来你出菜出家呀，看啦像，那就没有几多收入了。对，还生活啊，简单的过路，把都一类婚的房，简单的过路生活。
Xi Jinping's life would change when the village of Shibadong became a testing ground for a new initiative in 2013, the Targeted Poverty Alleviation Scheme. The idea is simple: to identify the poorest families in the poorest villages in China and help them help themselves. Rather than simply hand out benefits, the Poverty Alleviation Scheme asks poor villagers to take chances, be ambitious, pursue dreams. Which is why Mrs. Xi and her neighbours have ploughed a big chunk of the Poverty Relief Fund and their own money into a 160-acre kiwi fruits plantation. The first harvest is due in less than 3 months, and Mrs. Xi has come to check on her investment. Plantation manager Mr. Luo does the guided tour. Mrs. Xi cuts to the chase.
一年后多少？一年可能今年呢有1000把块钱样子，啊，等到升过期了就有5000了。
为了开单弄开不能多人那边还都弄来就介入，为这么为烈士家都500人，干你们干了谁也懂，为了小事你都该愁。
我们在精准扶贫所遇到的 最大的问题实际上如何对贫困人口扶志，就是你要有志向，要摆脱自己贫困。
当我是一个孤儿的时候，是我学会了喝酒，喝得来醉如泥，每天就睡在马路中间啊。
They're trying to allow more spaces for people to be economically autonomous and self-directing.
我养蜂养了4年，我们这里是最原生态的那个土蜂蜜。工作地帮我安排一个师傅，让我跟他一起学，我学了半个多月。
Every poor family in China has a dossier, a folder, and somebody's responsible. Even senior party officials from the province being assigned there and being responsible for 150 or 200 poor families.
去年我有2、3万，今年估计还要多一点。
Every family has a plan, and that's the way their income can go above the poverty line.
But targeted poverty alleviation focuses on much more than income generation.
浪费是村治疗委还工作队帮我们这个贫困层解决一些大龄青年没有找到媳妇的人。我的现在生活我就比原来好了好几倍。
Though half of China's 1.3 billion people live in urban areas, more than 600 million live in the countryside. And to help them get better opportunities involves providing new infrastructure. The building of roads to the once remote village Shibadong have given its inhabitants a new way to make a living. In the past, few strangers found their way to Shibadong. Now they come by the coachload. Poverty Relief Task Force leader Wu Shewun says it's revitalizing the village.
15年前或者20年前，这个地方呢，可以说呢，我们现在用句话怎么说呢？原来是穷山恶水啊，因为这个里啊，根本没有外人来过。那么现在的话呢，它就大不一样了。中国最美丽的乡村了，这是我们的目标。
It's led to the renaissance of a centuries-old craft. The Miao have always embroidered their own clothes. Now, with the help of the task force, they've set up a collective to sell their work to visitors.
So it's like if the ocean comes up, all the boats sort of go up. That's the general plan of economic development, and that makes sense. But President Xi has taken it to a new level and say, okay, now we've done that, but now there are still some people who, because of geography, maybe in mountain areas, or because they have infirmities or disease, that it's not going to work for those people. So we have to have a targeted approach.
同步前进，一个也不能少。
In 2016, China spent more than $10 billion on tackling poverty. Since 2013, 60 million people have been raised above the poverty line. That's one person every 2 seconds. We have to admire the ambition of such a huge undertaking. And it seems right. With China's growing prosperity, the focus is to make sure that no one gets left behind.
What's pretty impressive, to give the Chinese government their due, is that the remaining 80 to 100 million folks who are in poverty don't just slide off the political radar screen, they are central to the political narrative in China.
习近平以人民为中心的发展战略是极其独特的。他对中国的经济发展提出了我要以GDP 论英雄，要以民生为英雄。
来问问你。
不能在安内，安内不能来不能在白中了，为小女白的业界不。
Xu Pajwan's visitor spent time asking various details about her life conditions.
而且今年你进来呢，这就小女白的就也常务这就中不了这可讲好来，别人就来不中这。那也不只讲到高呀，不解释，叫我们黑新闻也不呀，为此，起初不用，或者眼不用，眼当然不能国家主席，中国啊，中央了。
If you look at his speeches, there's a clear refrain that gets repeated quite often. He talks of people, he talks of poverty, and he talks of social justice. In the past 5 years, President Xi has made visits in 14 of the poorest regions in China. It's clear that Xi Jinping has an interest in the poor, but I wonder, where did that curiosity come from? I think one of the critical byproducts of China's newfound position on the world stage is that people are paying attention. So the things that Xi Jinping says, his philosophies, his strategies are of importance, not just to the Chinese people anymore. But what shaped Xi's approach to politics? How has his life experience prepared him to lead one of the world's emerging superpowers? Xi was born to an elite political family and educated in Beijing. But at the age of 15, he would experience dramatic change.
He went down to a pretty remote area and kind of smucked in. He had to kind of forget his elitist background. It's a very undeveloped area, so it was pretty tough. He was known as someone who did kind of cooperate and collaborate.
This is Liangjia in Yanchuan County, the village where Xi would spend his next 7 years. Local shopkeeper Liao Jinlian remembers Xi as a man who was happy to pitch in.
这就是过去我的山里受苦劳动，我的挑着担负，他的也过去担负挑负。
Xi got his first experience of public administration when he was elected village party secretary at the age of 20. His first project was to set up a foundry and a milling station, but he had even bolder plans. His biggest achievement was to organize the community to bring more land under cultivation.
修这大坝的时候的话，什么也做了，这个车子也推了，土也掏了。 种属性脏活、累活都抢不干，所以大家呢对他才这个尊重啊，和信任。当时70年代呢，这里的这个条件很不好，很艰苦，生活也很苦，但是在这苦的时候呢，苦中有乐。
For a contemporary Chinese leader to have an authentic link with the countryside is pretty important. He has eaten bitterness, and the Chinese word for that is 吃苦, and that gives him the moral right to speak in the way that he does now.
Xi left the district in 1975. In all, he'd served in 5 provinces at every level of the Chinese government.
President Xi was governor in Fujian, party secretary in Zhejiang, and then party secretary in Shanghai. Each one of those provinces are bigger than most countries of the world in terms of numbers of people and size of GDP.
The Chinese system, therefore, of training political cadres is pretty comprehensive. So when I look at people like President Trump, who's gone straight from commerce into the White House, in the Chinese system, this would be seen as just unfathomable, impossible not to have had extensive, decades-long direct experience in public administration.
Xi's extensive experience across China's vast landscape, interacting with different communities, would sharpen his strategy and prepare him to address China's economic challenges to come.
The backbone of any economy is infrastructure. And what China has shown is tremendous in terms of their investment in the infrastructure space.
我们实现了世界最大规模的基础设施革命，基础设施现代化。
To improve balances in the Chinese economy, President Xi and his team are investing in giant infrastructure projects. From an engineering perspective, one of the best projects, one of the most exciting projects, is the bullet train network. Big cities were the first to benefit. Now it's being rolled out across China, which presents 1 or 2 technical issues. To show you what I mean, I want to take you to Yibin in Sichuan province. Because this bridge is at the frontier of China's high-speed train network. Crossing the Jinsha River, it'll be a vital link on a new line connecting Chengdu and Guiyang. Chief Engineer Li Yanzhe is facing his biggest challenge.
这座大桥呢是目前世界上最大跨度的东铁两路钢浆拱桥。
大桥呢全长1.8公里，高度呢从水面以上到拱顶180米。大桥呢上层是4线铁路，下层是6线公路。
This bridge is taking 1,000 workers 4 years to complete. They eat and sleep on site. For assistant engineer Wang Bin, it's his first job since graduating, so he's really in at the deep end.
最少也得4次，爬上爬下4次，就那么高，爬上爬下4次，然后最累就是下午下班的时候。
Today, 2 new sections of the arch are being brought up the river. They have to be hoisted up and slotted into place, but that can't happen unless the clouds lift.
天气的各种变化可能会有一定的工期影响，
我们就像大风大雨就不能起料。
While the team in Yibin face an anxious wait, in cities like Shanghai, the high-speed train network is part of everyday life.
What infrastructure, a really good rail system does, is to create an interactive China. A China that it gets smaller and smaller, where accessibility grows and grows.
Yanqing, Hantai and Jing have caught the train countless times for work. Today, it's pleasure. They're off to Wuyishan to see an old friend and her new baby. In the days before the bullet train, the 700-kilometre trip to the mountains and rivers of Wuyishan would take anything up to 12 hours.
然后可是现在的话，我们通过高铁，我们只需要3个小时，我们一个周末来回。
In transforming China's economy, which is exceedingly important for the development of the country towards its goals of a moderately prosperous society by 2020, it is absolutely essential that the economy be transformed, and innovation is the key element to make that happen.
从极低收入的人口大国变成世界最大的，我们称之为上中等收入国家。
Good to see they've not forgotten the traditional gifts for the baby. For me, this is another small example of how the high-speed train is bringing people together and making this huge country that little bit smaller. Today, there's a 4x4 grid with 4 high-speed train lines running north to south and 4 east to west. The plan is to double that, with 8 lines running east to west and 8 running north to south. If infrastructure is at the heart of Shinomics, the political system allows a level of investment and long-term planning other countries find impossible.
The West attitude, the Western economist attitude is, it's got to make a profit. The Chinese haven't looked at it like that.
Because the political system is structured the way it is structured, it means that they are not subject to the volatility of having to court and cater to an electorate. Government is able to focus on economic challenges without being distracted.
The new line will cut the journey time from Chengdu to Guiyang from 14 hours to under 4. And now the weather's lifted enough to try and get the new sections of arch into place.
把这个拱乐用蓝色起重机把拱乐起吊到拱乐上去。
It's a tricky operation, even in good weather.
到，已经找到位了没有？
我在这里看着的。
The arches rise 180 meters above the Jincha, ready to be slotted into place. It's not a job for the faint-hearted.
我相信通过我们每个技术人员的努力，才会凝聚出我们的力量，把这个桥整体慢慢合拢，有自己的付出，有自己的辛苦劳动在里面，自己会很骄傲。
The bridge will soon be completed, and Yibin will join the high-speed train age.
But this massive infrastructure is not the only way to unite a country as vast as China economically. The gap between the cities and the countryside, the wealthy East Coast and the rest of China is huge, and it's something that President Xi and his government talk about all the time. But it's easy to forget how big China is and how remote some of these rural communities are. Lo Wen is a village shopkeeper, and she knows that roads and railways aren't the only ways of connecting people.
Technology has been a remarkable transformation of China. I'm not talking about cars and trains, but it's really interhuman communications.
因此，它实际上是实现了一个非常好的一个互利共赢，就打破了所谓我们称之为区域的市场或者地区的市场，变成一个全国性的市场。
This is a really interesting idea that might help close that gap between city and countryside. It comes from a little village called Xiabu in eastern China. Home to around 2,000 people, it's a small market town full of buyers and sellers. But lately, the way they buy and sell has been changing. Mrs. Lo is the woman responsible. She's been running the local store for more than 20 years. Now she's embraced e-commerce and she's taken the village with her.
每天早上起来嘛，就是把店门打开，然后第二件事嘛，就是往手机上的店门打开。
The village shop is now a data-enabled, real-time responsive, globally connected e-commerce hub. Thanks to China Post and their Yuligo website, Mrs. Lo's customers can now buy almost anything from almost anywhere.
我买了那个丝袜和那个热水壶啊。
那个两样，那他这里很方便的，我需要什么跟他说一下，然后他都会帮我找的。好，这样。
The role of innovation in terms of economic growth is absolutely critical.
So broadly, Chinese people, commercially and economically, do have a lot of freedoms, and really encouraging them to kind of be entrepreneurial.
Just outside Xiabu, Lo Shuishan is making oolong tea, the way he's been doing it for years.
老有个大镜头啊，但是一般来讲嘛，总是那个良益性，不要罪恶。他马上做一道的呢，但是要种良益性啊，这么大的要这两个量一下子的一些这个叫量一下子的。
It may be grown and picked the same way, but what's new is what happens next. After bagging up the tea, he's heading to Mrs. Lo's shop. Not only can her customers buy, they can sell too.
俺小媳妇的底下到过，一帮人过个告诉，一得要人洗干净的，一得到不让人恢复的，没管他啊。要是几个我晓得个人，俺比如说叫人家左右我也记住呢，我这一会感觉好做的，没得小啊。
Mrs. Lo weighs the tea, and Shui Shan names his price.
这个左右阿妈多少钱？
我们都买200块。200
块钱哦，那是我网高头买个说了，等200块钱嘛，40块包。
The deal's done, and Mr. Lo's oolong is about to go live across China.
30分钟，它就是在那个前台可以生效了，然后到时候看那个有没有人买。
It's finally time to shut up shop. She's taken over 5,000 yuan over the counter and nearly 200 orders online. And I reckon she's plugged a few more people into the internet and helped close that gap between the village and the city a little bit more. The combination of private investment, state investment and smart technology is distinctly Chinese. And the fact that this initiative that is being rolled out in villages and towns across China just goes to show how far ahead these guys are. In 2016, rural e-commerce provided jobs for 20 million people in China. The equivalent of $758 billion was spent online here in 2016. That's up more than 26% on the previous year.
I think there's entrepreneurialism in China which is very innovative, and there's a very sort of distinctive in the way that you can now use the internet in China or mobile payment.
One of the most fascinating aspects of economic development today is that there are many countries that have unlocked the public policy tools to increase economic growth and move many, many people, China's case, hundreds of millions of people, out of poverty.
Average incomes have risen fast in China. Back in 1980, it was the equivalent of $300 a year. 20 years later, that had risen to $3,000. And in 2017, average incomes are expected to reach $10,000 a year.
Seeing China develop today is almost like seeing the entire landmass of America get redeveloped. You're really getting to see a country reinvent itself, reinvent its infrastructure, rethink its culture, and do so very quickly and very publicly. What I love about it is that there isn't whiplash here. Citizens who live in rural areas are moving to urban areas, and that means new housing as well. Yu Hua and Zai Xin are down at their allotment at least twice a day. The couple have lived in Zhejiang province all of their lives. But 9 months ago, they moved into one of the most talked about housing developments in all of China.
The Chinese government, they are renowned at setting down a plan and going for it.
How do they manage to do that? I think one of the reasons is when you've been growing, for quite a long time, you are habituated to change. You do know what change is.
This 46-home development is in the village of Dongzhiguan that's been making waves all across China. What's great about this project is that it looks great. It connects to the existing Chinese community, and the folks who live there can afford to live there.
我这里的房子是去年到这里5年了，现在呢现在好弄好你清楚啊，那天等下当年苍蝇啊、米虫啊来，就你们来他们来领都说我们福气好，这么好的房子等那个啊。
实际上，我们强调的这个有恒财这个恒心啊，居住有机屋啊。 都是中国一些传统文化的一部分。
The Chinese are habituated to saving, and they are worried about not saving because maybe they won't be able to afford healthcare.
All across the country, people are beginning to feel more financially stable. But China still faces the big issue of how to support its young people and its elderly. Any ambitious venture begins with small steps. Meet Dr. Zhang. He's participating in a newly established nationwide healthcare initiative. As an American, right now the discussion of healthcare is a major issue in my country. How a government chooses to care for its infirm is a huge issue. Now, think about China for a minute. We here have a population 4 times the quantity of America. So how that medical process gets streamlined has huge impacts for this country.
China's demographics is a sort of massive problem. It's got an aging population. And then on top of that, as China becomes developed, it's becoming a country of greater instances of heart disease. So all of these are adding to the complexity of also trying to deal with wealth creation for all segments of society.
To help combat this issue, measures have been taken to improve China's social welfare system. That includes a brand new health insurance program.
My question is, will these be of sufficient scale and happening rapidly enough to preserve the sort of social and political stability the Chinese leadership wants? And that lies in their hands.
Today, Dr. Zhang is on his way to an outdoor surgery in Leizhuang village.
我们国家到目前为止，实际参保人群是超过了95%。
教了10多年学，现在呢年老了，任何的任务就下来了。
你现在搞的哪样？什么吃法子的？
早一苦晚苦。
哦，你爸妈没吃饱？
过去嘛，这个老百姓可能有那个病都得钱看，现在不一样了，有你的病，合着医疗，然后像我们1年只交了100块钱。
2017年，我们国家财政对卫生的投入在1.4万亿左右，卫生费用占 GDP 的比重已经超过了6%。
Healthcare efforts like these are significant in supporting the increasing population of the elderly, now almost 150 million.
最重要的就是中国在极短的时间内，将一个世界最大规模的绝对贫困社会构建成世界最大规模的全面建成小康的社会。
他自己用他自己的话，他说肉都吃完了嘛。要啃骨头了啊！前面的好吃的肉都吃完了，我下面要啃骨头了，啃硬骨头了。
To continue to build quality welfare services for all is a huge challenge. Without it, China's middle-income population cannot reach the next level.
It's not just the building the pretty buildings and growing the economy, but it's people's lives that are most important. Why is this so important to President Xi?
中国人不是说不想消费，他是不敢消费，这个就是个大问题。所以我是觉得是很好的时候，也做社会政策，社会政策做好了，中国的经济发展可以是一个可持续的发展。
I think we should spare a thought and be less finger pointing and finger wagging and maybe just think for a second of how challenging it must be to make those trade-offs. Should I invest in infrastructure? Should I invest in healthcare? Should I invest in this province? Should I invest in the schools and education?
In the mountainous and remote western part of Sichuan province is the region of Gansu. I've spent a lot of time in developing countries around the world, and the one thing that strikes me again and again is just how important education is for raising people out of poverty, for raising individuals, for raising families, for raising society. This is the Gala boarding school, home to nearly 1,200 children from the far-flung farms and villages of Gansu. Lessons here are bilingual in both Mandarin and Tibetan. Children here receive 15 years free education, 6 more than elsewhere in China. For students like Yama Chunso, it's opened up a world of possibilities. Not only is Yama Chunso's education free, so too is her accommodation. Yama Chunso knows she's been given a life-changing opportunity, and it's one she is determined to take.
特别高兴有机会去读书，我想我现在努力去读书，然后将来要当一个有能力的人，然后想当一个医生。
It's impossible in decades to create in rural areas the same services you have in the cities. But if I see my children having the same educational opportunity or close to that as the children of those who live in Beijing and Shanghai and other cities, then I feel better.
Since 2013, $415 billion has been spent offering every child in China a minimum of 9 years education. 1.3 million new teachers have been recruited. 12,000 new schools have been built. It also needs to be about giving people opportunities to use those new skills and to use that education. So business development, improved agriculture, and opportunities to broaden their horizons.
何谓中国梦？我以为实现中华民族的伟大复兴，就是中华民族近代最伟大的中国梦。
Everybody has a dream, but it's really in 2 parts. The country cannot realize its dream unless each of the people themselves are having their own dream. Everybody should have the opportunity.
In Sheju County in remote southwest China, the beautiful game has drawn young He Xinyi to not be afraid to think big.
我
在队里踢了半年了，有时候打前锋，有时候打边锋。
China is in love with football, but it's not all about bankrolling big clubs or buying foreign players. Football it's transforming the lives of thousands of young girls from rural China. It's taking them to the big cities and showing them a whole new future.
你为什么喜欢足球？
因为我发觉了，看见他们踢足球的很酷，而且有些女队员或者是男队员，他们都踢到重庆去过。我也想踢足球，然后我也想踢到重庆去。
足球啊，很想给孩子能带给自信。同时，我们要通过足球，让这些孩子实现梦想，让他到更好的学校去接受更好的教育。
With the right support and hard work, He Jinping is motivated like many others by the chance to get better coaching in the city. Meanwhile, in Chongqing, Li Chunju has followed her passion all the way, and there's no turning back for her.
当时来这里，我们很不适应，天天哭，基本上都是。这里呢，我们的初中、高中都有好的学校找了，靠自己的努力来，去找好的学校，这才是自己嘛。我的梦想就是可以当一名足球教练吧，然后我小时候经历的这些苦啊、甜啊，然后再教给他们。
中国梦 as she thinks out to one side of her mind, the China dream. 我的梦 my dream. And so what the Chinese authorities seek to do is to say that you can have a big dream for your aspirations in life and who you want to be as a person. But remember, there is this big dream for the country as well.
Wherever you go, the phrase the Chinese dream keeps cropping up. 1 billion different people, 1 billion different life stories. Dong Ying is an accomplished musician with an international reputation who plays an ancient Chinese instrument called the sheng. She's also travelling around Beijing introducing traditional classical music to the next generation.
这个字儿的右边有很多像栅栏一样的啊，其实你看看它就很像是把它当成一个土地的话，孕育出来很多很多的植物，对吗？
其实给孩子们上这样一种音乐普及课，不光是为了让他们了解这样一件乐器，也是为了让他们多多的去接触这种传统音乐。因为只有孩子们去喜欢它，然后去接触它，去学习它，才有往后的传承。
Listening intently is 11-year-old Hua Qi. Later that evening, back at home, her father asks her about Dong Ying's visit.
那这个就那个声是吧？你喜欢他什么呀？
我喜欢他吹那个声音。老师给我们吹那个凤凰展翅的时候，我觉得那个声音特别的好听。
Hua Qi and her father regularly go to the weekend concerts at the National Theatre for the Performing Arts.
I think that Xi Jinping wants to persuade the Chinese of the capacity of the Chinese to modernize not just with material products, but in every area of culture. We can do it our way.
These Sunday morning concerts are a regular fixture. Tickets are subsidised to encourage people to come along who might not otherwise be able to afford it. What an unusual and beautiful instrument, and it's inspiring to see the efforts being made to engage young people in traditional Chinese music.
I think it's really interesting to see kind of an openness, but frankly, even an enthusiasm to accept this level of paradigm shift within their culture, their politics, their economics. Take, for example, 52-year-old Wang Chunsheng. For him, Beijing's traditional parks are simply an opportunity to express himself with friends.
大家有时候拉错了1个2个音也没关系。
只要大家能开心就好。
From the sound of music to the sound of busy traffic, cab driver Wang effortlessly moves between these two worlds.
我在北京开车已经有这个20多年的历史了。我小时候的梦想是盼着什么时候自己能有这么一把琴。随着现在经济发展，过去有梦想的话，现在我能实现了。
Each of these dreams, no matter how personal, plays its part in China's ever-evolving journey. It's fascinating to see how President Xi Jinping has taken a pre-existing idea of the party serving the people and adapted it for the 21st century.
所以说，它不是一般的政治口号，而是实实在在的一个我们说行动方案。
We want to set realistic goals and want everybody to participate. We don't want great disparities in wealth. That's the Xiaogang or moderately prosperous society.
China comes from a very different tradition to the Western tradition. And so the way it thinks about these things is very different.
The internet age isn't always impersonal. By conceiving policies that focus on people rather than simply on GDP, Xi Jinping's people-centered approach is a bold and innovative way to tackle inequality and other tremendous challenges China faces as it transforms.
The real kind of focus is on creating a more appealing emotional message, and that is about good quality environment, own their own place, know that tomorrow will always be better than today. All of the things that were promised before now finally seem to be happening.
Through many small but firm steps, a renewed vigour has gripped much of China today.
Xi Jinping is a leader who dreams very big dreams.
What then does the near future hold for the People's Republic?
Clearly, at a time when Western countries have become the richest that they have become, while income inequality is at its worst, and having China engaging as a big global player with different ideology, I think is beneficial for